So the first poet that we're going to have for you is Teika Maria Smits, and it's actually Teika's publication date today. So give her a big celebratory fake clap, or you can use the emoji chat function on Zoom. So Teika is a writer, freelance editor, and mother of two. Her poems have been widely published. Teika was formerly the managing editor of Mother's Milk Books and is now an editor-at-large for Valley Press, alongside running the Book Stewards, which is a writer's support site that she now manages with her husband. In her spare moments, she likes to doodle, draw, and paint. And luckily, she also writes gorgeous poetry. So very much looking forward to hearing you tonight, Teika, and thank you for opening the evening for us this evening.
Thank you very much, Isabelle, and it's lovely to be here. It's so lovely to see so many friendly faces as well. So big waves to everyone, and thanks for coming. So I'm going to start by telling you two things about my pamphlet, which is called Russian Doll, and that's that I'm half Russian. My mother is actually from Moscow, so some of the poems reference her. And the second thing to mention is that my pamphlet is actually in two parts. The first section is about daughterhood and growing up, and the second section is more about motherhood and family life. So in this first part, I'm going to read 4 poems from the first section. The first poem is called Shades of Red. Once an actress, my Muscovite mother knew how to make an entrance. Striking in fuchsia, she'd arrive late to my school performance, call my name, wave, have trouble finding her seat. I'd glow crimson and turn into the smallest version of myself, the littlest Russian doll, the one most easily lost, almost, but not quite, invisible. And the next poem is called Mint Choc Chip. And I'm especially reading this because my friend Holly M, who's here tonight, hello Holly, she said that she liked it once when I read it out. So kind of this one's for you, Holly. And it happens to be in the shape of an ice cream as well. So Mint Choc Chip. I can still remember the excitement I felt 30 odd years ago, when my sister announced that the mint choc chip ice cream she'd made was now ready to eat. It was delicious atop the bland shop-bought cones that our mum had somehow managed to get us. We ate every last bit of it, savoured each sweet, creamy mouthful, and then I feasted on the last of the choc chips, the survivors, still clinging to the plastic tub. And when it was all truly gone, how sad was I. The next poem is called An Early Lesson in Fake News. One paper said that my mother, the Venus of vodka, was blonde. Another that the Russian doll was a sexy redhead. A third was certain that the nude model from Russia with Love was brunette. She planned world domination by luring her art students, lucky Eton boys, behind the Iron Curtain. I was never mentioned, except as a side note. Mrs. Smits lives in Windsor with her husband and 2 daughters. How fortunate for mousy-haired me. And I'm going to finish my section with a poem called The Pulmonary Embolism. One day my father goes to the shops. Walking back, his lungs collapse, his legs give way, he falls and thud. My world stops. His heart rate soars before it drops. Clouds roll in, the sky turns grey. The day my father goes to the shops. A passing neighbour sees and stops. He asks my dad if he's okay. I fell, he says. My world stops. An ambulance comes, one more of the props in this tragic real-life play performed the day my father goes to the shops. The kindly paramedic mops my father's brow. She knows she cannot say, it's just a fall. My world stops. Now death arrives to reap his crops, and they all know today's the day he'll die beside these shops. He falls and thud. My world stops. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teika. That was beautiful. And congratulations on Publication Day. I know it's a bit strange in lockdown to celebrate, but it's great to celebrate with you virtually. I should say actually that all our pamphlets are the same covers, designed by Jane Byrne, who's also a poet that you might know. So if we all look like we're reading the same books, it's because we have very similar book covers. So the second poet that we got for you is Oak Ayling. Now, Oak is a Pushcart Prize nominated Cornish poet and a closet librarian, and Oak's other works can be found in various literary magazines and in print anthologies. For example, For the Silent from Indigo Dreams Publishing, and Light Through the Mist by from the author Helen Cox. So when you're ready, Oak, really looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I can't believe we've got so many here. Okay, so yes, this is my pamphlet. It is called With Love from the Curator, and it is born essentially from my borderline obsession with museums and from the observation that often, if we really look at our own memories, we sort of store them in the same way that museums store all of their artifacts. So I'm going to jump straight in with a poem called Heritage. Heritage. We know little about this exhibit, but scientists have come to believe it had feathers. This is the beginning of the tour of my grandmother's house. We already have an intuitive feel for this. In the dry storerooms of the museum, they keep the hoard of my grandmother's prescriptions. One room for birds, another beetles, the next, my grandmother's pharmacy. We tipped them all out on the bed once, counted the boxes of paracetamol, 44. Buried the blankets in blister packets, careful not to drip the Matterpost over the French Queen spread. The lipsticks next, the perfumes, pristine condition, 6 decks of unused cards. There are great books laid open, filled with the lengthy rants of my maternal grandfather. Carefully placed beneath them are my grandmother's 2-word replies and a photograph. They walk us through the Second World War with a quick step, leaving several doors closed. My grandmother has black hair then. She cracks open one of the displays and peers out at us. I don't know if she scowls as we walk on. I expect instead that she pretends not to have looked at all. The recognition of what makes a genus or a family is partly a matter of conscience. We wade through the drifts of shredded film piled on the cutting room floor. What's left on the reels is all that I know. There are empty cases at the far end of the dim-lit hall. The docent apologizes. There are some creatures of which we only have the bones. The next poem that I'm going to read for you, thank you, is a poem called Unless We Make It Ours. Unless we make it ours. You fill up all my mother's china cabinets with ammonites. Say, darling, where do you want the celestial planetarium? It's Thursday by the time we've sorted butterflies into drawers. Not all lives are unboxed like this, that I know. Home was a word so blurry when we were young. You say it's not home unless we make it ours. Unless we string up these poems on brown parcel tags. We suspend our books, our origami egrets, our passport photographs. Make table arrangements with your collection of corals and birds. It keeps its record of us as we grow. Ours are the eggs in this cedar root basket. My final poem for this section is a poem called The Closing of the Exhibit. The Closing of the Exhibit. There are no answers for my mother and I about the one her parents lost before, about the birth under anesthesia, or the decision not to behold the body, nor the colour of the nursery they shut the door on for 6 hopeless weeks. You wish it wasn't running down the stairs of our family, knocking on nursery room doors. We open ours again, step inside, touch the curled up fur of the teddy in the crib, hold each other, mouths wallpapered shut. The clothes fold back into boxes. We are loath to open, loath to close. But the museum hours lengthen. The exhibits dusted, carefully removed. Banners taken down. Next time, says the archivist. Next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I hope that we'll all be able to go to museums quite soon in person and maybe be inspired to write a poem of our own. So next up, I'm really excited to introduce to you Terry Quinn. And Terry is a required NHS medical engineer. His previous poetry collections are Away with Poetry Monthly Press, The Amen of Knowledge, Indigo Dreams Publishing, which won the 2012 Jeff Stevens Memorial Poetry Prize, and To Have to Follow with Indigo Dreams Publishing, which was a collaboration with Julie McLean. His poems have been published widely in UK magazines, anthologies, broadcast and displayed on a Guernsey bus, which is very cool. And he was actively involved with the Damson Poets. I'm not done with your bio, Terry. It's a long bio, no, I'm joking. And Preston Poets. And he'll watch football absolutely anywhere. And thank you for sacrificing football tonight, Terry.
Thanks very much, Isabelle. I just wanted to give a quick introduction to the pamphlet. It arose about, quite a few years ago now, about 10 years ago now, and I started to think about wanting to write a sequence of poems that drew together concerns I felt about the world then and even more so now. And over the period of its writing, I felt this could really best be achieved from the future, looking back through the voice of a single character, my fictional historian, J C Dunne, who could then blend, sort of facts now, but my imaginations of fictions in the future. And it sort of gives him J C Dunne hopefully gives it an objective sort of academic authority with touches of his humanities. He looks back on the Third World War. Forward. In the immediate aftermath of any armed conflict, there is an understandable rush to put into places words and images in an often confusing period. Even I was guilty of succumbing twice to the lure of a guaranteed headline and a hefty addition to an academic's bank balance. But enough time has passed, and more importantly, papers and minutes have been released, one way or another, that now gives an opportunity for a formal objective study, not of the war itself, that will come later and requires far more space than this brief pamphlet. But in the meantime, I feel that there is a need to examine some of the elements of that period prior to when the world broke down. A present from the past. There is a professor of glaciology at this university who starts her first lecture to a fresh intake of students thus: lock the door and don't move. I mean it. This stuff melts even here, and I'd hate to see your grants cancelled. And then she slowly, some may say dramatically, removes insulation from a long, slim column of ice, drilled from a glacier that once covered where these words are being written. She's told me many times that the most common question in the refectory later is why those cores were ignored. A view from above. There is a photo taken from the space station. I have it on my office wall. It shows a nighttime planet when city lights twinkled around the globe. We had a game. Join the dots, the quickest, the shortest, the most interesting way to get from, for instance, Nairobi to Oslo. My wife decided who won. I remember the furore when the crew updated it, posting Earth divided by a broad black band either side of the equator, and called it the Third World. My wife didn't think it was funny. And this is my last poem for this half. The assassinations. It does not fall within the compass of thin or thick books of history to make moral judgments. Squeezed between the full stops and commas, it will be inevitable that there will be a slight coloured here, a suggestion there. And I'm putting that disclaimer in now as it's time to mention the brief period when the political classes were targeted in Chile, Sweden, the United States, and Germany. One of the oddest aspects of that wave of bombing and shooting was that it was the most law-abiding citizens who had weighed the evidence of science versus political inertia and had decided to act in the name of the greater good. Now, with 2020 hindsight, they were, of course, irrelevant. At best, questions were raised. At worst, they gave governments absolute power to do absolutely nothing. But in quiet moments, I sometimes ask, well, what would I have done? Thank you.
Great stuff, Terry. Thank you so much. And so next up, I have the delight to introduce Claire Booker, who is based in Brighton. Her poetry has been set to music and performed at the Actors Church in Covent Garden. Simultaneously performed at 6 venues in England, Scotland and Portugal. Also displayed on Guernsey buses, so must be something about poetry in Guernsey. And she was filmed by Aberystwyth University and published by Bucharest University as part of a UK Romanian poetry collective. In 2019, she travelled to Bangladesh as a guest poet at Dhaka's International Poetry Summit. And her poetry pamphlets are The Bone That Sang, which we'll hear from tonight, and later there will be postcards with Green Bottle Press. When you're ready, Claire.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks very much. So I'm going to read from my pamphlet, which is, as Isabelle says, a beautiful version. We all share the lovely design. I'm going to read 3 poems in this section. And I've looked really at these poems, are looking at the kind of connections that there are between the living and the dead. So the first poem is called All Hallows Eve, an invitation. Honey will tempt them. They have a sweet tooth. Be careful not to break the peace with boiled cabbage or pour water outside the house. Leave windows wide open, even your doors. Talk only of them as you might a baby or new lover. If a spoon drops, leave it there. Remember, there is much you have forgotten too. The raw edge of a smile, how it feels to be looked at with that kind of love. No need for introductions, they have you in common. Give them space to dance, they'll whirl their shadows around the room, stretch time to its thinnest. Your empty chairs will beguile them. Let them lose themselves in the pleasing shine of linen and tableware, the niceties of salt. What does it matter if their glasses never drain, their plates remain stubbornly heaped? They have things to tell you. So the second poem I'm going to share with you is actually about my mother and how something as ordinary and banal even as trying to fill in a tax return brought her back to me for one lovely moment. And the poem is called Deadline. When all else fails, I turn to St. Jude with an inventory of the desired miracle. Annual statements, consolidated tax vouchers, certificates of deduction of tax with, from memory, the ominous addendum, a duplicate statement will not normally be issued. They're holed up somewhere in the house, inside a green folder. How hard is that to spot? Kneeling in the understairs cupboard, I grapple with boxes, tennis rackets, old papers, my mother's last walking stick. Even her waxed shopping bag gets upended. A handkerchief drops onto my hand like a dove. It smells of her. And my final poem for this section is the title poem, actually, of my pamphlet, and was inspired by the Grimm's fairy tale entitled The Bone That Sang. And in this story, there are 2 brothers who go on a quest for half the kingdom and probably a princess as well into the bargain. But one ends up murdering the other. And the murdered brother's bones are eventually found by a shepherd, and he carves them into a little flute. And when he plays it, the truth comes as a song. And I just felt that was a really strong metaphor for how genocide and other atrocities can actually be hidden for years and years until the bones start to sing. The Bone That Sang. A herdsman, driving his beasts through the torn mesh of forest, stumbles on a thread of human vertebrae, crafts its frail ivory into a mouthpiece, and a note comes fluting from his lips. Its pitch, at first inaudible as the cries of pipistrelles. In his palace, the Generalissimo hoists the ripe meat of genocide onto his shoulders, builds a cage out of the contortions of his own mouth, where he constructs truths that walk and talk like real children. Ravines clot with secrets, whispers float like thistle seed to all corners of the kingdom. He plucks each chalk white petal of paperwork before he signs. She loves me not. He loves me. She loves me. He loves me not. Under this vaporizing sun, people suck on pebbles to assuage their thirst. Men are turned to firewood. Children drop like leaves. But still he knows how the vanished can fruit like death caps from any scrape of earth. That bones will sing when they find a ready ear. Thank you. Thanks very much. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce another of our poets, Isabelle Kenyon, who's been doing some wonderful hosting for us. Isabelle is a Northern poet and the author of This Is Not a Spectacle from Microchat Books, The Trees Whispered from Origami Poetry Press, and Digging Holes to Another Continent from Claire Songbird's Publishing House, New York, and also Potential from Ghost City Press. Isabelle's the editor of Fly on the Wall Press, a socially conscious small press for chapbooks and anthologies. And last year she was published by Wild Pressed Books. It was a short story entitled The Town Talks. So over to you, Isabelle.
Thank you very much, Claire. So I'm going to be reading tonight from my pamphlet, which is called Growing Pains. And it was actually ironically out last year, which so even though I've never performed it in person, it's been a while, but yeah, it doesn't feel like a while because everyone's sort of stunted, not really going anywhere. So the first poem I'm going to read is called When the Worms Came. And as you're growing up, you might relate to some brutality in the playground of other school children. It's about that. When the worms came, there were two types of playground children. Ones who ran like jackals, brandishing twigs like sharpened spears to tear worms in two, and ones who prepared for battle, offering their squatted form, a shield for wheezing worms, dragging fatigued tummies over slippery tarmac where rain had stranded them. Not all worms made it to the soil, the land of plenty, flopping on emergency twig stretchers, egg and spoon race with jackals hot on their tail. When the worms came, the children practiced doctors and nurses, learned about anatomy, how some creatures have no bits, and enacted Lord of the Flies with the worms as their piggy. Part of this book is about grief. So this next poem is called Afterlife. Death ended my membership of the Catholic Church. I spent 3 years of university, setting an alarm for services never attended. 1 year on, I step through the doors, weep for my faith. This next one is called The Call of Grief. This pitted stone recurs. The crescent moon rises. I ovulate, I cry and feel grief on my breath. The sliver of it on my tongue. Stripped and reshaped. This feral love, the call of it, finds the nooks and crannies of my mind, the wild spaces, the pull of it. It tastes of life. Grief. Once it has entered your life, it does not leave. It survives. On sips of fluids, segments of bread. As you starve, grief speaks. And in that moment, you do not breathe. The mornings get harder. The rain begins, rises, sweeps that pitted stone out to sea. And to end this first section, I would like to read one a little bit different. I call it my cheeky capitalism poem, because growing up, you have to learn that you're in a system of capitalism. So that's why it's in here. So it's called Sometimes I Feel So Alive With You, I Can't Breathe. Can you hear the pennies? It will define us. Tell me, are you anxious? My ergonomically adjusted chair brings me productivity. It allows for weakness. You break your back for the spreadsheet. There are other ways, I say. Numbers bleeding from your ears. There is an end goal. If you found it, would you know? We're sitting heavy. Meters of intestinal tract unraveling. Pound is a weary art. It will define us. Searching for numbers, pot of gold numbers. Tell me, are you anxious? Thank you. So the last poet that I'd like to introduce you in this section before we have a break, just for 5 minutes, and Claire will post in the chat and tell you about where you can buy books if you would like to. And we all have special offers today, so do check the chat about those offers. So the next poet before our break is, of course, the lovely Victoria Bennett, who is a writer, poet, and the founder of Wild Woman Press. And her latest poetry pamphlet, To Start the Year from Its Quiet Centre, is published by Indigo Dreams Publishing. Her memoir, All My Wild Mothers, was longlisted for the Nan Shepherd Prize in 2019 and the Penguin Right Now Programme 2020. 1 second. Her writing has won a Northern Debut Award, Northern Promise Award, the Waterhouse Award for Poetry, and the Mother's Milk Non-Fiction Prize. She lives in Cumbria with her husband and son. The owner of unruly genes and a rebellious body, she juggles chronic illness with being a carer, mother, and writer. And when not juggling, she can be found howling with her wild woman tribe. When you're ready, Vic.
Thank you very much, Isabelle, and thank you, everybody. I'm going to read 4 poems from my collection To Start the Year from Its Quiet Centre. I wrote the book in 2016 following the death of my mother. My mother died from terminal mesothelioma caused by asbestos exposure, and I was her carer in the last year of her life. The suede shoes. No good news from now, the doctor told us. The nurse cried. You did not. I spend my days on the telephone searching for certainties, names, dates, results, chasing facts like dandelion wisps, running out of time. Sometimes we talk about death. Mostly we talk about hospitals. Bit by bit, their language claims us. Meanwhile, the hen scratches around the tree and the bees collect nectar from a creeping vine. The sun finally shines. This is our in-between living and dying time. Why bother planting that seed? Why turn the beds for a summer that will never come? Why bother buying the pretty suede shoes? We choose the shoes because we can still find joy in a step. We plant the seed because we still love the way it insists itself into life. We turn the beds because there will always be a summer, even after you are gone. Soon we shall have only echoes, but for now we drink tea and watch the clouds move, watch the light pass between the storm, and there is still good news. The new night dress. I rub your skin with oil of rose, quietly masking the sweetness of these dying days. At night, I brush your weeping hair, button the new night dress, fingers tender like a mother's, tracing each lace flower. When she can no longer move, the doctor cuts it from her skin, frees her flesh from its hold. This garden has grown wild. Words for dying to. How long have I got? How will I know? Will you tell me when the time comes? What is there? What will it be like? I don't want to go. I dreamt I was in an old church full of cobwebs, and a woman sat crouched in the corner, all grey and fading, and a young man came to her and held her hand, and he sang, and it was so beautiful it filled the church, and I could feel the music inside me, even though when I woke, I can still feel it now, the song. What time is it? It would be nice if I could just go to sleep. I'm sorry I didn't write the letters. Shall we go outside? And I keep telling them it's not my legs. Why have they got my legs tied? Why won't they let me go? I want to go home. Tell me what's going on. Why has the bruised straw man come? I can't tell you. I mustn't be fibbing Tibbs or the nurse will be cross. What time is it? I thought I was dead, but maybe I'm not. Is it morning or night? Have I been asleep? I did something silly last night. I died and made myself come back. Dad kept a lookout for bombs, you know. Couldn't go to war. His heart. We hid in the Anderson, Ovaltine and milk sweets, damp on the walls. Glad he never got to see how it all came to this. It's getting too hard now. I'm very tired. I think it's time to go. I can't breathe. My mouth is so dry. What's happening? Who is here? I'm sorry. I did it all wrong. I don't recommend this to anyone. Don't touch. Broken. The paramedic tells me he must remove the wedding band. I hear the pliers snap. You search for your husband, who cups the broken circle in his hands, whispers, "Hush." I close the door quietly. There is nothing more to do. Thank you.
That was gorgeous, Vic. I think the way you read is so full of love. I love listening to it. So what we're going to do now, you might need to go and find a tissue anyway after Vic, is that we're going to have a break. We're a bit early, so come back at 8:25 is when we want you to come back with a brew or a glass of wine or gin, whatever you're drinking, beer. And then we're going to hear from the poets again in 5-minute slots. And Claire is just putting how you buy the books right now. And yes, so take a look in your break and feel free to go off mute if you would like to talk to everyone. If not, feel free, turn your camera off, come back, and we'll see you at 8:25. Thank you very much.
Will Claire? Will the poets be in the same?
Talking of audience, I think we might all be back. Excellent timing, everyone. Probably because we don't have a mini bar on Zoom, but thank you all for staying for the second half. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask you to go back on mute, if that's all right. That's just so you're not in the recording as well, so you managed to avoid that. And we're going to go in reverse order, as Claire said earlier. So we're going to start with Vic. So when you are ready, Vic, we're very much looking forward to more poems from your collection.
Thank you very much. And thanks, everybody. Hope you've had a nice break. I'm just going to keep going now. How to watch someone die. First, let go of all the plans you once had, the casual ways we assume the right to live. Create a box for all your future tense. Catch yesterdays in your upturned hands. Unfurl memories. Learn to read code. Before long, these too will be dust. Abandon sleep. Forget the clock and roll like a wave on dawns and dusks that drip like morphine into days that feel as if they could go on and on and on, but never look away in case you miss the moment that it ends. Learn to live between the punctuated hours, your ears attuned like the city fox to spot an altered breath, your eyes alert to the pallor of skin. Juggle everything and fail, and tell yourself this is your best, and know this best will never be enough. Except you cannot change any of this, and break, and get back up again. Try not to let them die before they die. Try to let them stay in this world, even as this world gets smaller every day, even if some days you wish an end to this. And when it comes, try to remember to stop, to sit and listen to the silence after the dying is done. Watch the morning come. Try all over again to let go and live. Post-mortem. My mother's heart weighed 328 grams. It doesn't seem enough. Her lungs weighed 747 grams on the right, 1,419 on the left, a bag and a half of tumour on each breath. Her kidneys were 117 grams and clean to the end. Her spleen, an abstract organ, came in close second at 116. Her brain recorded 1,215 grams. A fair weight for a life of memories with nowhere now to go. On final count, she weighed 75 kilograms. The rest was cancer, 32 kilos drained away. Which is good. She never wanted to be fat. But it doesn't seem right that her heart weighed so much less than her death. It carried so much through all the years. She died saying she had no regrets. Maybe that is what made it so light. All the spent stuff left behind, so she could pass easy to the other side. Tell me lies. Please, do not tell me of your perfect deaths. Do not speak of surrounding light slipping serenely out of sight. Please, do not tell me of your perfect goodbyes. Tell me nothing, or tell me lies. In turn, I will tell you mine. That the drugs do work, that the pain is short, that once the oxygen stops, the heart will start to give. Cooking. Somewhere between the carrots and the leeks, my legs buckle. A sound bubbles up, forms into a single word. Mum, 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 mum. And here I am, small and scared, reaching for a hand that isn't there. Her face turned out to the distance, her back closed. I bang my fists on the floor, begging her to come back. Between the longing and the fury, I gulp at the air, drop the knife to the floor and begin to crawl out of the door and up the stairs, hand, knee, all the time stuttering mum, 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 mum. I open the wardrobe, pull out the drawer, spray Lily of the Valley into the air. It reeks of synthetic flowers, rubbing alcohol, and underneath a cloying, sweeter smell, a mix of piss and blood and death, the smell of decay. I take the embroidered pillow, raise it to my face and breathe her in. I unfold the red cotton bag that held her pills, start to recite the names, falter, and find I have forgotten some. How can that be? I reach deeper, pull out the answer phone, plug it in, and press play. Message after message. Her voice. Hello? Hello? Are you there? I guess you're too busy. Darling, are you there? Hello? Hello? Pick up the phone, love. It's me. I'm here, Mum. Come home. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to introduce now the very lovely Isabelle Kenyon, who's been doing a fabulous job with everybody today with introducing us. And she's going to be reading some more poems from her wonderful pamphlet, Growing Pains. Over to you, Isabelle, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Vic. I'm going to start with one which is dedicated to anyone who really hates blood. So this one's called Squeamish. 1. She leans over the knife. The point glints, grins, gulps. Power cuts veins. Courage. Trembles away from its eye. It watches, tastes her fear. 2. Muddy, polluted blood, sanitized from her open vein. Tackles the vial from her peripheral, wary of its bite. 3. She shows her again. Push point through thigh. The click indicates full immersion. The needle measures 2/3 of her thigh. Sealed, it sits opposite at the table. A reminder. 4. Under pressure, she imagines her bones seeping through her skin and rising like hot water balloons. 5. If she lets it, her brain will uncurl like meters and meters of tired rope. And the next one's called Spaces, and a lot of the collection's about that strange space between becoming an adult, say 18, but not feeling like you're an adult at that sort of age. So it's called Spaces. Adult spaces, work white lies, air thin, whispers. I take up too much space. Apologetic, crying in the cubicle quietly. Such a nuisance. Fine. White lies. Too small to breathe. Too much space to put my limbs in the silence of what I cannot say. And this next poem is called Silver Birch. The leaf of you grew around my waist. When you turned to dust, I fell to the earth. Cold seeped through. I want to be buried under a tree, you said, to deaf ears. I buried the thought until I buried your body. The silver birch is frail, like you, but when sun peaks, splatters its leaves. It is a celebration of colour, the tongues of leaves chattering near my ears. And I want to end on a happy poem because hopefully we'll be able to travel soon to sunny places. So this one is set in an Italian town in the north, and it's called Breakfast is an Important Part of the Afternoon. Wilting in the shimmer sheen of a small Italian town, hot tongues in hot milk, we sip the morning down. The sky toasts. Almost hidden, half moon bites ladder my legs. Thirsty creature punctures, rude polka dots. Mark my skin foreign. You lay a soothing hand on the ripening sores. Thank you so much. So now I'd like to hand over to Claire Booker, and she'll be reading from her pamphlet, The Bone That Sang.
Thank you, Isabelle. Thanks very much. So yes, I've got 4 further poems to share with you right now. Quite a lot of the poems in my pamphlet have a sort of social connection, really, looking at various injustices in the world. But there is humour too, and here's one that I think is rather tongue-in-cheek, and it's called A Pen's Vomit. The shimmy and shine of Monsieur's machine with its whirling dervish of brushes, the tiny bones of me crushed into a relentless formula which states, you are this, you remain this, you will not change. And now these iron hooks. Watch me fly from a boy's grip, shooting the stars as I did when Silica thrashed melamine in outrageous heat before worlds were truly set. Uniforms are fisting a hard stink on the street. The mob is riffing, cracking open the sky, carbon against carbon. Undersides are up. And my next poem was inspired by those people you see standing on street corners holding up advertising placards or sandwich boards. And I just feel that is no kind of job to be basically a piece of street furniture. So this poem is called Bored Man. School tipping out time, wild shrieks, bodies heave and break, buggies scythe through Dodgem style. Self-assembled, positions himself against the railings. His limbs are wood, his hands are rivets. Beard full, anorak copious over dhoti. Placard pinioned in his solar plexus, so the weight of the big idea won't put his back out. Bill's Diner. Human loophole in the bylaws. Your eyes are hazardous to our indifference. Perhaps you're dreaming of kite flying, suicidal, praying, performing a C-section in your head. Or perhaps you're calculating the inflationary price of freedom. From Isabelle, now we're going to have one from Greece from me. Nightfall at Skiathos Harbour. Along the drag, an old man sets up his telescope. Look at the moon, see Venus, very cheap. And there they are, heavenly bodies stripped to their detail. From here, islands sink like the eye to milky Venus again, bright but tiny, then lost to cloud. How you both would have loved this, sipping the evening with its rhythms splashed across the bay. These singing trees, the hilltop villas lighting up like Advent. If I could swap, I'd cross the Styx with whatever coin. Leave behind this air worn lightly. Just as your bodies conjured mine from night, so I'd return the favour, trade myself for one of the silver bream foraging harbour ink, to feel your footsteps by the water's edge and leap for pieces of your broken bread. My final poem for tonight is also the very last poem in The Bone That Sang. And it's one I wrote while I was in the fortifications of the Jibral Faro in Malaga, which is the sort of castle high up on the hill. And you can just see the entire stretch of the sea and the town. And it's dedicated to my friend Caroline Oliver. View from the Jibral Faro. Here, where caliphs wove empires, only the call of swifts breakfasting above burnt ochre crenellations that steam like washed horses. From this height, the city's noise pools at its ankles. There are tower blocks, cranes, cement silos, a cruise liner in its rectangular bath. A tiny bicycle cuts a stubborn line along the Avenida de Toros. In the old town, the cathedral exposes its back, red, shrunken, almost shameful. Hilltop churches spread north like a painted Belen. Even the tips of the Sierras seem touchable. I can see almost everything except you. Today, you'll lay your head in the well-turned soil of a Surrey morning. The quiet truth of you, breathed out in snowdrop and celandine. Thank you. Thanks very much. So our next poet is Terry Quinn, who's going to read from his pamphlet, Notes on the Causes of the Third World War by J C Dunne.
Thank you, Claire. Lost. There is the famous image of the first island overwhelmed, a single flag flying, seas breaking the top floor of a civic building, and the face of a child cleverly caught, sitting alone on the deck of a lifeboat, not understanding, and the same face coming ashore to welcome in crowds in a big city. Even I had to check where it was. The Antarctic solution. The transfer of migrants through Tierra del Fuego was not, as it happened, planned. This may raise a few eyebrows in some far-flung places, but it is quite clear that the sudden arrival of around 5 million refugees from countries on the Tropic of Capricorn took governments to its south by surprise. It was, of all things, the preparations for a Football World Cup that meant materials, including food and drink, were ready at hand to transfer migrants quickly to refugee camps constructed on the then little-known Palmer Island. Whether this was undertaken in a ruthless or selfless manner still depends, I'm afraid, on your point of view. A personal statement. I have tried, and mostly succeeded, in keeping this work within an academic discipline. But these rules, although useful, belong to a world that has gone. I am no detached third party. None of us are now. So I want to write about Maggie, my wife Maggie, although everyone reading this will have their own reason for keeping their own story alive. Staff nurse Dunne, who agreed with me when I couldn't see the point in being a part of that present, who packed my case, who waved me off the last boat from Galway. She wasn't for the fighting. No side was worth it, that's what she said. But I can change a bandage, that's what she said, as she gave me an envelope, her last will and testament. I'll never open it. And this is my final poem, Epilogue. A colleague asked me how many types of government there'd been in history before now. She's a mathematician, so I don't know why, but for simplicity and a quiet life, I ignored Plato and gave her city-states, empires, and the nation-state. She could argue, well, I would, that mass communication did for the first two, which left nation-states at the turn of this century as more or less the status quo. But that was then, and now we're in the state we're in. Something untried and untested. And that's the interesting thing about history, the future. Thank you. I'd like to now hand over to Oak Ayling, who will be reading from With Love from the Curator.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Terry. Okay. Hello, everybody again. I've got 3 more poems for you, and I'm going to jump straight in. This one is called Museum of Flat Pack Furniture. Museum of Flat Pack Furniture. Here are the 48 Allen keys you swore you lost, between the boxes and cracks of the floorboards. The pencil you put behind your ear to look more carpenterly. You didn't use it once. Nothing trains a man to be a father like the flat pack. It struggles and wails at you from the floor. You put everything on backwards. The pictures in the manual pulling at your patience. Here is the mug which spilt its steaming contents over them, and 3 tea towels used to mop your brow, doctor, inserting screw 123775, 1 of 4, into nut 100514, 1 of 3, with surgical precision, as though building it perfectly might protect it this time, as though it might do a better job than I have. Here are the photos I said I deleted, propped against the second mug of coffee and the coaster I yelled at you to use on the changing table. Last time you didn't build it. You put it off and we fought. You think that was bad luck. So this time the room is custard and the linen is cream. And when it's finished, we lay on the rug stroking each other's faces, like 2 kids painting a picket fence. And thank you. My next poem is called Chinsekiken. Chinsekiken. Jinmenseki, a word we only learn later in life, though of course it has been with us all along. Something you invented as a child, but never gave a name, not knowing it had a name already, like the cat which strayed. Stones with faces bluff, and so often a child believes they are animate, watching. The way a pair of disembodied fish eyes might stare up at you from the bottom of a bucket, and your father, the scientist, might say, "How lovely," and ask you no more questions than that, because he knew enough just by looking. But suddenly you've lost your taste for cold meats. In this museum, unseeing eyes belong to the Jinmenseki. I'm going to finish with the final book. Thank you. With the final poem in the book. And this one I think might be on the quiet my favourite. So it's called A for mammals, B for birds, C for reptiles, and so on. D is for fish and amphibians, for swimming, for this subaqueous phase, for the tickling joy you will find in the sandstone nodules shaped like a duck. Though you will not see it until we work down through the alphabet to M, for rocks. E is for mollusks, for muscles sewn tight in their places, staying right where they belong and not going anywhere. F is for insects, for hungry caterpillars, for beautiful butterflies. G is for arthropods, for intsea, for tuffets, for ladybirds, safe in the rain. H is for the soft-bodied animals, for Tigger, for Roo, for the pinks and blues, for arms stretched out like stars. It is for mummies and daddies, for lambs and for teddies, for peach-coloured sky and things being made new. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Okay, so to round us up the evening, we still have, I think it's 3 poems? I don't know, but we've still got Teika Marija Smits, fantastic Russian doll. So I'm going to pass you over now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oak, and beautiful poems yourself. So this is, I've got 5 poems. They're short and they're from the last half of Russian Doll, which is more about motherhood and family life. So I'll start off with the first one, and it's called Treasure. Curiosity and a sudden thirst for savagery makes her split open the matryoshka, pop, 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 until, how satisfying. The baby doll rests snug in her palms. The swimming lesson. We take it in turns to show interest in the swimming lesson, to wave at our children when they pause, panting from their exertions to seek our approval. We direct remarks at each other, isn't it hot? They need to get some air in here. I watch my daughter, part mermaid, part astronaut, glide and then kick her way through the water, and I long to join her, to escape the heat, the small talk and screens, the gravity that binds me to this sticky plastic seat. The right tool. Unlike his Russian grandmother, who has a tendency to use the one tool, a knife, for everything from sawing and scraping to peeling and digging, my son understands the importance of using the right tool for the job. As I walk around his new Minecraft world, strangely blocky in my Alex skin, he patiently reminds me that an axe is best for chopping trees, a shovel for digging dirt and sand and gravel, a pickaxe for mining stone, a hoe for tilling soil. At nightfall, when the zombies come groaning, he instructs me to wield a sword. Terrified by these computer-generated monsters, I scream and run, suddenly nostalgic for the safe simplicity of Tetris. Russian Doll. I am heavy with the hopes of my younger selves, the ones who dreamt of all I could be. They call to me, disappointed, as my once bright dress begins to dull, as I thin and am worn smooth by little hands that dismantle me daily. I answer with excuses and apologies. Life intrudes, I explain, takes us apart and rebuilds us askew. And I'm going to end on, hopefully you'll think it's an upbeat poem, but really it's about living in the moment and how the moment is all we really have, and it's good to cherish it. The swing. With aching limbs and clicking joints, I climb onto the swing. I push the air with straightened legs and quickly gather speed. A pendulum of sorts am I, with limbs that ache no more. The years recede as I gain height. I'm born, reborn in air. Now childhood dreams of long ago, heady, poignant, sweet, rush within, stir memories, ignite a sleeping flame. A smile unbidden curves my lips as I recall the days of playground games and wobbly teeth, the smell of just cut grass. My cares recede, I'm old no more, and all there is this, the back and forth, the up and down, the sun, the sky, the swing. Thank you very much.
So I feel like that second half went super fast, but that's actually the end of our poets' performances for this evening. So really, we just want to say a big thank you for coming to support us in lockdown. It's really great to have a virtual audience to join us, and also to launch Teika's book today. So lots of celebration this evening. Claire's put in the chat where you can get these books if you want to. Also, we're going to send round the special offers and links to buy the book by email. I think tomorrow Terry and Claire are going to send that round. But yeah, I mean, we've now got another 3 minutes, everyone, so you can unmute and chat and celebrate like that. Thank you.